Hey everybody, Will here from O'Reilly Auto Parts to show you how to change the rear brakes on a 2017 Toyota Highlander. Procedures will be similar for most Highlander models from 2014 to 2019, but be sure to know the specifics for your vehicle before getting started. Once you've got your supplies together, here's what you'll do. Park on a level surface, chock the front wheels, and use a lug wrench or breaker bar and 21mm socket to loosen the lug nuts on the rear wheels. Use a jack and jack stands to lift and support the rear end of the vehicle. Remove the rear wheels. Use a ratchet and 14mm socket to loosen and remove the caliper bolts. Work the caliper off the rotor and hang it somewhere out of the way, making sure there's no pressure on the brake hose. Using a flathead screwdriver if needed, remove the old brake pads and hardware from the caliper bracket, taking note of their orientation so you can install your new pads and hardware properly. Use your ratchet and 17mm socket to loosen and remove the caliper bracket bolts. Set the bracket aside for now. Remove the old rotor. If the rotor doesn't come off easily, you can use a flathead screwdriver to turn the shoe adjuster to contract the parking brake shoes. Before doing this, make sure your parking brake is not set. We're going to install import direct rotors, which don't require cleaning, but for most other rotors, you'll need to use brake cleaner and a shop towel or rag to remove oil from the friction surfaces of the new rotor. Anytime you use brake cleaner, remember that it will strip paint, so be very careful where you spray it. Clean any rust off the hub with a wire brush. Adding silicone brake grease to the hub before installing your new rotor will make it easier to remove it during your next brake service. Install your new rotor. And use one of your wheel lug nuts to hold it in place as you continue to work. Now, clean the exposed portion of your caliper piston with brake cleaner on a towel or rag. If the rubber boot is cracked or if there's brake fluid leaking, the caliper needs to be replaced. Attach your bleeder tool and open the bleeder valve by turning it counterclockwise. Using an old brake pad to protect the piston, compress the brake caliper with a brake caliper compressor tool. When you're done, the piston should be flush with the housing. Tighten the bleeder valve, being careful not to let any air into the line. Detach the bleeder tool. Now, give your caliper bracket a visual inspection. If the bracket is extremely rusty where the pads or hardware will sit, it needs to be replaced. Remove the slide pins and visually inspect them. If they're corroded or pitted, they also need to be replaced. Spray the bracket down with brake cleaner, but don't use a wire brush to clean it. This can lead to further corrosion. Wipe down the slide pins and apply some fresh silicone grease. Reinstall the pins and make sure they glide smoothly. You'll also apply silicone grease to the notches on the bracket where your new brake hardware will sit, as well as the back of your new brake pads. Install the new hardware. With the slide pins and hardware installed, it's time to reinstall the bracket. Lift it into place and thread the 17mm bracket bolts by hand, starting with the top one. Use your ratchet and socket to tighten the bolts. Then use your torque wrench to tighten those bolts to 70 foot-pounds. Install your new brake pads. Now, move the caliper into place over the pads, making sure the brake hose isn't twisted. Thread the two mounting bolts by hand, starting with the top one. Use your ratchet and 14mm socket to tighten them. Once they're snug, torque these bolts to 20 foot-pounds. If you used a lug nut to keep the rotor in place, you can remove it now, as well as your caliper hanger. Reinstall the wheel and tighten the lug nuts until the wheel is secure against the rotor. It's always a good idea to change brake pads and rotors in pairs, so repeat these steps on the other side. Lower the rear end and remove the wheel chocks. Use your 21mm socket and torque wrench to tighten the nuts in a star pattern to 76 foot-pounds. Once the job is complete, before you drive anywhere, be sure to pump your brake pedal several times until you feel the pressure return. Some brake fluid was pushed out when you compressed your caliper pistons, so check your master cylinder and add fluid as needed. If your brake pedal feels spongy, it's likely that you have air in one or both of your brake lines. Here's a link to a video on how to bleed those lines to remove the air if needed. To help break in the new components, it's a good idea to test drive your vehicle, slowing it 30 times from 30 miles per hour with moderate brake pressure, allowing the brakes to cool for about 30 seconds in between each slowdown. We used import direct brake pads on this repair, which feature a break-in coating that doesn't require this process to be completed. Try to avoid aggressive stops during this break-in process. Your brakes will probably smell after you've done this, and that's okay. If the odor persists past 500 miles or so, or if you have excessive dust on a wheel, you may have a stuck caliper. And that's it. You'll find everything you need for this and other jobs at your local O'Reilly Auto Parts store or O'ReillyAuto.com. If you're not completely comfortable doing this yourself, we'd be happy to recommend a professional technician in your area. And be sure to subscribe so you'll see all our new video content. We'll see you again soon.